seats, please, and let's get started again. Okay, our next question is a single-part question, and we'll start with John Boyd. The Department of Land Management showing up with a SWAT team and snipers to collect late taxes. The EPA restricting farms from selling goods. The EPA raiding town dinner thrown by a grateful farmer for serving unauthorized food and forcing the food to be thrown out. Just a couple of examples of the many multi-layer federal agencies that have created laws without Congress and the ridiculous behavior they are capable of. What are your views on whether a county sheriff can defend against an ever-intrusive federal government? You have 3 minutes for that one, John.
Okay, that's a question that's really important to me because I like to fashion myself as an environmentalist. My wife, my family, we love to travel out west, and I see the abuses that the Bureau of Land Management has perpetuated out west. I see how the IRS is out of control. I see how the EPA is out of control. Some of their edicts, they come in and what they do to these small towns, what the Bureau of Land Management has done to some of the ranchers, they're absolutely out of control. They make up their own rules as they go along. I wouldn't be a party to that. I cringe when I see what's going on out west with the Bureau of Land Management, in particular what happened out in Nevada and Utah recently. I would not be a party to it. I wouldn't support it. I wouldn't send my troops out there to be a part of that, to get involved in that. In fact, I would do everything I could to dissuade the federal government from coming in. But I will tell you this, in defense of the federal government, we have an excellent working relationship here in Northwest Indiana. I don't see any abuses here in Northwest Indiana. I've not been witness to it. And whenever we call them for resources, technology, manpower, they've always been Johnny on the spot, and they've been great. And there have been a lot of things we haven't been able to do without their assistance. But if I see something that's wrong, I'm going to stand up and tell them that I don't agree with it. We're not going to be a party to it. We're not going to get our people involved. I like what happened out west where the local sheriffs got together and encouraged them to pack their bags and move along. And it's unfortunate the sheriff had to be the mediator in that situation, but who helped to resolve it all? It was the local sheriff. Why? Because the sheriff was respected, and he was a well-known member of the community, and he treated his community as though they were important, and he valued their input, he valued their citizenry. And he's almost like family out there, and I think that that's something that we need to return to here in LaPorte County as well.
Steve, I'll repeat the last line. What are your views on where a county sheriff can defend against an ever-intrusive federal government?
Well, as John said, cooperation with them is a beneficial thing because there's a lot of resources there that we can draw on and get help with certain things. On the other hand, I don't want them coming to you and trying to push some of these ridiculous things like happened in Michigan here not too long ago. People that had milk that was fresh from the cow, and they were made to dump it all out because of the federal regulations on such things. Apple cider just doesn't taste the same anymore like you used to be able to get. So yes, they kind of are overstepping their bounds. And I would rather see us defend you. If we can't keep them from doing these things, then it's going to require our support for you to be there to try and either be sure that they don't get out of hand or defend you against encroachments that they have no business making. But this administrative law stuff that's been around for many years now, the sheriff can't change any of that. But you guys with the live hearts, for those of you who are here because you're not decided, not that the others don't have, but I recognize that I have friends here, they have friends here. In some cases we're preaching to the choir here in our own respective choirs. But it's going to be up to you to hold the feet of our legislators to the fire. We've got to start doing that, or these things are going to just get worse and worse. The sheriff and these departments can't handle all these things all the time by ourselves. We have to have the assistance of you getting involved with the legislators to say enough is enough. There is no administrative law. It's all constitutional law. Take these things out of the administrative courts and let's pass laws that are in accordance with the Constitution instead of all this administrative things, that they just decide what, and you can get different answers from different agents, as you well know, with the IRS or any of these agencies. You won't get the same two answers if you talk to two different people with the same situation. So yes, we can be a resource, but it is good to know that they're planning something. So we don't want to thoroughly upset the apple cart here in cooperation with them, because that's good information to have. But if we get too abusive and stand against them, that may not give us the opportunity as a law enforcement body to know what's coming down the pike. So there's going to be a real balance there. Yes, the Constitution needs to be defended, but yes, we need to be able to do our jobs to protect you by having this information that something is coming.
Al, the last part of the question is, what are your views on where a county sheriff can defend against an ever-intrusive federal government?
I kind of touched on this already in my opening statement. My campaign is about working with the agencies that are out there. We're all here, we are all citizens, and we all need to work together to make it a better place, in general speaking. I have my place on earth. I know I have my profession that I've chosen. And, you come to the different forums and you get asked different questions. And my biggest concern about that is that we get off base. And I respectfully, I respect the question, but my personal opinion about having everybody here is talking about LaPorte County. What is important in LaPorte County right now? Each day when I work midnight shift, I go to calls where domestic violence is it's every day, every shift. Child abuse, substance abuse. I know we've talked about heroin, the heroin epidemic. It's a substance abuse. Alcoholism. We have people here that are fighting against that every day. These are things that are important issues for LaPorte County. And that's really what I want to focus on. So, I don't mean to not answer that question, but I want to make sure we stay on focus on really what this race is about. So, that's my response to that. Thank you.
John, you need another 60 seconds. Steve?
I'd like to make one other comment. We've talked a little bit about police militarization and the equipment and things that they have it gets out of hand sometimes across the country, and we want to be sure that doesn't happen here. The only good thing I can see from militarization is in our defense against these things. Yes, that's pretty extreme, but when you look back the last few years of the way things have been going, I have a great concern that they're going to get worse. I can't tell you what it's going to be like 4, 5, 10 years from now, but I don't think it's going to get much better in the big thumb of the federal government coming down on us. So in that respect, this militarization could be a good thing for a resource to protect the community as a whole rather than used against the community. And that's my thoughts on that.
Now, you need another 60 seconds. Okay. Since we started the second segment, I should have, before we got started again, I should mention the fact that LaPorte County Patriots are sponsoring our event tonight. Some of you may have come in after we got started. I'm Ron Miller from WEFM Radio, and I'm going to introduce the three candidates again, then we'll get to our next question. On my far right is John Boyd. He's the Republican candidate for LaPorte County Sheriff. In the center is Steve Osborne. He is the Libertarian candidate for LaPorte County Sheriff. And on my closest left, right, is Al. Wait a minute. This guy right here. This is Al Ott. He's the Democratic candidate for LaPorte County Sheriff. And we thank you all for being here. Let's get to our next question. Steve, this is for you. Another two-part question. Some people have seen the militarization of our police departments as clouding the lines between police and soldiers. Images of police looking like military personnel and SWAT teams being used for serving warrants have many concerned that there may soon be no way to distinguish the difference between the two. What are your views on this subject? The second part of the question, the acquisition of the MRAP by the Michigan City Police Department has come under some scrutiny. Some police departments across the nation have decided to return the vehicle. If you were presented the opportunity to acquire an MRAP in the same manner as Michigan City for the county, would you? Why or why not?
Okay, the first part, the militarization, we've discussed that a little bit here tonight already. Specifically, they wanted to know, though,
Question says, what are your views on the subject of police looking like military personnel and SWAT teams being used to serve warrants? Have many concern there may soon be no way to distinguish the difference between the two.
yeah, the police departments have changed a lot over the years, and just in the last 30 or 40 years, I believe it started with Los Angeles, coming up with the SWAT team, Special Weapons and Tactics, which has unfortunately become necessary in some cases because of the nature of the world that we're living in, the weapons that the bad guys are armed with. There is all kinds of reasoning to train our police officers, obviously, to be able to handle some of these situations. However, paramilitary is just like paramedic, and I want to be sure we get the designation correct here. A paramedic can do things, out in the field that a doctor is directing him to do, and, paramilitary is like the military is military-like in the way they act, the equipment they have, the responses they make, and it's in training. And I read something here in this report about a firearms instructor. Al here is a firearms instructor. I'd be interested to hear if he comments about this, whether he heard this or not, but in some conference here in the nation, recently, a firearms guy was talking up about the militarization and how they are a commanding presence and get people to do what they want you to do. So this is a growing problem. It's a resource, but it's being abused in a lot of cases, and I want to be sure that we don't get to that point in LaPorte County. Now, presented with a case to buy an MRAP, or not buy an MRAP, but pay for the expenses to get it delivered, no, I would not go for that. The MRAPs, I understand it. Each one's a little bit different. You got to have a guy that's thoroughly familiar, checked out with it, to be able to drive the thing. They're not safe, especially if you're responding to an emergency with it. Yeah, it's kind of nice to have if you had a situation that you really had to have one to get some people out of a neighborhood, but it's not like we're Chicago, not that it can't get worse, and not that we don't need the tools, but you need to be in control of that. Your control is only every 4 years, though. The control after that is one of these three guys right here. So who's going to really pull in the reins on these things if it becomes necessary to be sure that they're not abused?
Yeah, I have a question, two-part question. Some people have seen the militarization of our police departments as clouding the lines between police and soldiers. Images of police looking like military personnel and SWAT teams being used for serving warrants have many concerned that there may soon be no way to distinguish the difference between the two. What are your views on this subject? The second part, the acquisition of the MRAP by the Michigan City Police Department has come under some scrutiny. Some police departments across the nation have decided to return the vehicle. If you were presented the opportunity to acquire an MRAP in the same manner as Michigan City for the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department, would you? Why or why not?
I'll do the MRAP first. In regards to that, I've been hit with that question numerous times campaigning. I would not be in favor of actually even of acquiring an additional one for LaPorte County. Going back, it's all about working together, working with the other agencies in the county. If and when, hopefully it doesn't, a situation arises where we would need something to that magnitude, I know that we can count on Michigan City Police Department to be there. So that's in regards to that. There's no sense in us spending more tax dollars to do, whether it's the delivery or the maintenance or the training of an officer to operate that vehicle. In regards to the militarization of our society, growing up as a kid, I thought I lived in Mayberry. And it may not have been, I don't know. But that's an attribute to the law enforcement officers that were working each day. Because it may have been crazy, I don't know. But growing up as a kid, I didn't feel that way. There's a lot of you I went to school with, and I think I've had conversation with many of those, and I think we all feel that way. And we're all trying to want to go back to that for our kids. So, with that being said, that's an attribute, again, back to the law enforcement officers that were active back then, and there's some in here today, so thank you for that. But today, things have changed. In my 20 years, there's retirees here that have started back in the 60s. I see it back there. Things have changed. And, you know, there are times when we are hit with opposition, very aggressive opposition. And when that happens, my question back to the public, do you want us to be prepared? I'm a law enforcement officer. I train at the academy. I train firearms. I have done it for 15 years. I teach at the academy. So do you want the protection? Do you want us to be there? Because I know right now there are officers in here, every one of these guys, I know that I can count on them to be here, be there for you if we are met in that position. So, you know, as far as what we look like when we do that, why does that matter? It doesn't matter. So that's my stand on that. Thank you.
John, would you like to repeat the question?
You better so I don't
Okay.
miss anything.
Some people have seen the militarization of our police departments as clouding the line between police and soldiers. Images of police looking like military personnel and SWAT teams being used for serving warrants have many concerned that there may soon be no way to distinguish the difference between the two. What are your views on this subject? The second part, the acquisition of the MRAP by the Michigan City Police Department has come under some scrutiny. Some police departments across the nation have decided to return the vehicle. If you were presented the opportunity to acquire an MRAP in the same manner as Michigan City, the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department, would you? Why or why not?
Well, there is a big difference between police officers that police our community and our soldiers. We're dealing with our citizens, not enemy combatants. That being said, we owe a lot of our technology, a lot of our equipment to the military. They've been a great proving ground and a training ground for us. As sheriff, you've got a huge responsibility. You have to send men and women in harm's way when everybody else is running the other way or police officers are running into that danger. You have to well equip them. You make a pledge that at the end of each shift, the end of each call out, that they're going to go home to their families. And that rests very heavily on the heart of an administrator and ultimately the sheriff as well. I want to make sure that my men and women are equipped so they don't become part of the problem. They're part of the solution. Does it matter to you if emergency response team comes to your home, if heaven forbid you've got a home invasion and maybe you're being held hostage, or you're the victim of a violent crime, what that officer looks like when he arrives at your home? The difference between the military and us is our gear says police or sheriff on it, and it's well marked. We're not soldiers. This is something that we can't take lightly. As far as the MRAP is concerned, and I've had a number of conversations, 3 times a week I have lunch with the chief and the assistant chiefs of the Michigan City Police Department so we can exchange notes and we can stay on the same page with what's going on in LaPorte County. And we talk about the MRAP. The MRAP is a defensive tool. It's not a tank, as some purport in social media or even in some forms of media. You only have to go back about 12 years and you can look in the archives of the Michigan City News Dispatch and you can see, well, there was an officer that responded to a domestic violence call in Michigan City and he was met with a shot to the face. And then when officers came to rescue him, they were met with gunfire. And then the suspect set fire to his home. And the Michigan City Fire Department arrived to try to put the fire out and try to rescue the officer that was injured in the line of duty as he lay there. And the picture on the front page of the Michigan City News Dispatch is Michigan City policemen with ballistic shields holding them up with firemen standing behind them with their fire hoses trying to put out the fire. Had they had an MRAP then, they wouldn't have had to have those Michigan City firemen in harm's way. I look at the MRAP as being a regional tool. I'd love to have a helicopter here in LaPorte County. We just can't justify it. So we have this regional tool that's stationed at the Lake County Sheriff's Office. If we need the helicopter, we call the Lake County Sheriff's Office and they're happy to bring it over. Love to have a bomb squad here in LaPorte County, and most of their technology is a result of what's been developed in the military, but we can't justify it here. So we have a regional tool. If we need it, we call upon the Porter County Bomb Squad. We called them several weeks ago to come over and assist us. The MRAP is a regional tool for all of law enforcement in Northwest Indiana, and it will be a resource for us as well. But no, I can't justify having an MRAP here in LaPorte County, and I wouldn't get one.
Just briefly, this ACLU report of the responding police departments that they had that used SWAT teams for various things. Only about 7% were for barricaded subject, hostage, active shooter. All the rest was for warrants or, things like that, that years ago, we didn't used to do that. Yes, once in a while you're going to have a situation, and I don't want somebody going into a situation not being prepared. They've changed the way that we respond to school shooters now. Now, yes, the police officers run to the trouble while people are running away. That's how you handle this. There's been a change in law enforcement in that respect. That's what you do, and you better be equipped to handle that. Those are the situations, not the warrants, not the coming looking for something. There's no reason to storm someone's house with a battering ram for a $50 drug deal. That just doesn't make any sense to me, and we're losing the drug war as it is.
Now, do you have any additional comments? Thank you.
The one thing that I think you, the public, should remember is we're all law-abiding citizens in here, but we, at the time, when we deal with these people that are not, they don't have any rules, and we have all the rules. So why not have us be better equipped to handle the situation? And again, that goes back to the service that we're trying to provide for you. As a sheriff, I want to make sure all these men and women that are going to be working for the sheriff's office to be going home to their families at the end of the day. So that's so ever important to me, and I know that's important to you guys. Wouldn't be here otherwise. So thank you.
This one is for Al. Single point question. The subject of putting the inmates at the county jail to work on projects like roadside garbage pickup and snow removal and other duties that the county may have limited funds to accomplish has been around for a while. Would such an endeavor be something you would be willing to make happen?
Actually, I think it's a great idea. It's a good question. There's two things you can gain by that. We can help clean up our streets, our along the roadways, or whatever the task that they've been assigned to do. It would be a good thing for our community about making it more pretty or beautiful, whatever your verbiage you want to use. Secondly, incarceration does not teach anybody to stop the action that put them in there in the first place. So, if we can teach these male inmates to, I'm assuming only because of resources, male inmates, to get up every day, they have to eat their meal. Then they are ready to go each day to go out and do their service, whatever they're going to do that day. It teaches them responsibility. They may not have had that in their life as growing up, and that's not their fault. We can do that. That's a service we can provide to them. Again, the whole idea about the whole reason we exist, we have laws, why I put people in jail, for lack of terms, isn't so much that we want to put people in jail. It's about we want to make people need to be accountable to their actions and obey the laws of the land. And the whole plan is that we want them to be productive people in our communities. So we can have, it would be a two-edged sword, however you want to word it, so it could work out good for everybody. So.
Sure. The subject of putting the inmates at the county jail to work on projects like roadside garbage pickup and snow removal and other duties that the county may have limited funds to accomplish has been around for a while. Would such an endeavor be something you would be willing to make happen?
Yes, absolutely I would. I think it's a great program. It is somewhat manpower intensive though, because you can't send the offenders, and of course they would be nonviolent offenders that aren't a risk to reoffending society when they're out on this work-release crew, but you have to send supervision out with them. I think it's an excellent idea, and I think we can expand upon it. However, you can't expand upon it too much because it is so manpower intensive. They have to have supervision. But what I would propose is working with our prosecutor, working with our judges as an alternative to incarceration. Because all too often, like you, I read the newspaper, I take personal interest in the cases that I've had over the years, and I see that somebody that's been convicted of an offense, say, that is rather high profile, or maybe it's an offense in which I was the arresting officer, investigating officer, and I see that the judge finds them guilty and fines them $1 plus $73 court cost. I think we need to put them to work. We need to get more than $1 out of them. I think we need to send them out to our beaches and clean them up. I think we need to send them to our playgrounds and clean our playgrounds up, and our streets, and remove graffiti. You get caught spray painting graffiti, your sentence ought to be removing the graffiti that not only you put on the schools and the buildings and the playgrounds, but the graffiti that everybody else that didn't get caught put on those viaducts and schools and playgrounds as well. So I'm all in favor of alternatives to incarceration. I think what we ought to have in our jails are our violent offenders, those that are a risk to society. And if we have the violent offenders in our jail, I think it would be too much of a liability to bring them back out into your neighborhoods and your communities.
Steve, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure, go ahead.
The subject of putting the inmates at the county jail to work on projects like roadside garbage pickup and snow removal and other duties that the county may have limited funds to accomplish has been around for a while. Would such an endeavor be something you would be willing to make happen?
I would. I like the idea of that, always have. However, I think it was Al that mentioned that can also be a double-edged sword, or maybe it was John. You have to be very careful. These guys have nothing to do all day right now except figure out how to get out. So you want to be sure that you're not helping in any way the plan there. But yes, we need these people to get out once in a while and do some of these community service projects so that they can become a working member of society. The chances of rehabilitation hopefully are good, and these are things that can help because we need to make good citizens. There's also technology that can be used, maybe in conjunction with the courts, to get some of these nonviolent offenders out of the jail so that we're not spending your tax dollars on trying to keep them there when there's other less expensive technologies that can be used to keep track of them. On the other hand, we also need to be careful that we're not putting them into situations that is going to cause more problems because of another offense or something. So yes, I would support things of that nature in conjunction with those who know the prisoners the best as to which ones to choose, because the sheriff isn't always going to know that. He's going to have to depend on the jailers and the jail supervisors to find those candidates who are most likely to behave themselves, to benefit from it, and to work hard.
How would you like an additional 60 seconds? Sure.
Just real quick, when I worked back in the jail, there were inmates that had more seniority than I did. It kind of sounds funny, but it's true. What is the problem with that? They're repeat customers. So again, we got to look at these different, what do you want to call them, programs that we could use, and this leads me to our drug treatment courts and our veterans court. These are good alternatives to incarceration. These are people obviously that wouldn't be in this program because they're going to be doing their drug courts and their veterans court. I support those programs very, very much. And if you've ever listened to the veterans talk about it, I've recently attended a program where a veteran was he was the actual graduate, and it'll make you think. They provided the service for us to be here tonight, and for us to give that back to them so they can be a functional person in the society. It's a worthwhile endeavor. So the whole idea of incarceration, just locking people up, is not going to be the answer entirely.
Sean, would you like another 60 seconds? No, thank you. Okay, Steve?
I would just like to...
Your mic's not on.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. I would just like to mention the Justice Assistance Grants. I'm not sure if the county, unfortunately, is taking advantage of those or not, but Al mentioned the various courts and things. This is a program that can be used for law enforcement, for drug purposes, or it can be used for treatment. And these treatment uses are very, very low. It's also contained in this ACLU report. The counties and the jurisdictions are not taking advantage of that part of the grants. They're putting it towards equipment and things like that, and other law enforcement and training, which is fine, but there isn't very much at all going to treatments. So we're going to get those repeat offenders. We're going to get them with more seniority than some of the jailers. So we need to be sure that we're utilizing the assistance programs that are out there and available.
All right, the next question is a four-part question, and they're relatively short, so I think the best way, because we're going to start with John, I think I'll read all four of them, and then if you want me to read the individual ones, so we can try to squeeze all of this into 3 minutes, we'll see how we do this. The first question is, what do you feel the biggest challenge facing the Sheriff's Department at this time? The second question, how do you define public safety? And what practices will you implement to help ensure it? Number three, what is one characteristic that sets you apart from your opponents? Number four, what would be one of your possible downfalls as sheriff, and how do you plan to compensate for it?
Okay, help me back to the first one.
Okay, what do you feel the biggest challenge facing the sheriff's department at this time?
Well, I think the biggest issue facing the sheriff's department and the community is our heroin problem. It is absolutely an epidemic, and I don't mean to sound like a doom and gloom guy, but unless you've got your head buried in the sand, it is an epidemic here in LaPorte County. It's not a problem to identify it. Anybody can identify the problems. It's what are you going to do about it? We need to stop talking about the issues we have here in LaPorte County, and we need to start doing something about it. How do we do that? We involve the public, we involve community service organizations, we involve faith-based organizations, we involve the courts, we collaborate with law enforcement, call in additional resources, we get treatment that is readily available to our substance abusers. We treat them like they're members of our society and not castaways. We get them into treatment, we get them back here, we set up support networks for them because they fight those demons each and every day. We have a strategic plan that we need to put into place as to how we're going to deal with this, and that'll start the day after the election, not January 1st or after I start to learn the ropes a couple years down the road.
Second part, how do you define public safety and what practices will you implement to help ensure it?
That's a tough question to answer because it's very broad. The bottom line is public safety is about keeping people safe. And what are you going to do to keep people safe? What plans are you going to implement? We're going to continue to do it the way we've been doing, or are we going to evolve like most other law enforcement agencies have? This is 2014, soon to be 2015. You need to get a command staff that's involved. You need to rally the community behind you, because a community that rallies behind their police department and is supportive, they find that the police department is more receptive to the community and their feelings and the direction that they want from their sheriff's office.
I'll combine 3 and 4. What is one characteristic that sets you apart from your opponents? Which one of your possible downfalls would be as sheriff, and how do you plan to compensate for it?
The attribute that sets me apart, I would say, would either be my experience or my passion for the job. I absolutely love what I do, and that is evidenced by my work product, and what I do within our community, in our communities throughout LaPorte County. And my biggest downfall would be the fact that I probably don't delegate enough. The reason that I don't delegate is because my executive captain that I work so closely with and some of the other members of the command staff are busy as well. And I don't expect them to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. A sheriff, though, the sheriff absolutely has to delegate more. I realize that. But you need to have a good, reliable command staff in place, and you need to start telling your command staff, this is what you expect from them, and this is what we expect you to get done.
I'll read the first question, and then we'll take them as we did with John. What do you feel the biggest challenge facing the sheriff's department is at this time?
Well, I'd have to agree with the drug problem. I disagree a little bit with how we're going about, or how we may go about solving that. I know you're not going to believe this, but I was raised a Latter-day Saint, and I've never had any recreational liquor. In fact, I was surprised when I found out that some cough syrups have alcohol. Other than that, I've never had that. And I don't understand why we can't raise a generation of that. Yes, that's extreme. You're not going to find many cases where, somebody's never had a drink before, but in my case, that's so. But there are other things that the kids aren't learning that are leading to this. And one of them is, now you put a Pepsi in front of me, and it's going to be gone in a couple minutes. You put a chocolate bar there, it's going to be gone. I have my issues still, as anybody does. My chocolate saying is the proper utensil for eating milk chocolate is a shovel. So we have those as we go through life. We have to teach the kids that there are corporations out there that want to hook you on these things, and we have to teach them how to moderately deal with these things, and maybe a little more naturally will come the fact that, hey, I don't want to give up my free will. I don't want to give up, the control that I have of myself. So I think that's one way to approach the biggest problem in the county.
Second
Not that there aren't other ways to deal with the drug problem, but I think we're missing the boat on some of the principal things that we need to be concerned about.
How do you define public safety, and what practices will you implement to help ensure it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I drive a lot in my business, working on transmitters, going out to some of these tower sites, and I see all kinds of atrocious driving, and I wish that, I was in an unmarked squad sometimes. On the other hand, I wouldn't want my guys writing you a ticket for something that they let their neighbor get away with last week. So, yes, we have to be safe. There's an awful lot of us out there that are going through stop signs like crazy. I mean, it's very strange. I don't know why suddenly we're having this trouble, but public safety is mostly when you're out on the street, and we need to be sure that you're safe. And if at least pulling you over and give you a warning or something, but we've got to try and change some of the habits in this county.
We have a few seconds left. What is one characteristic that sets you apart from your opponents? What would be one of your possible downfalls as sheriff, and how do you plan to compensate for it?
Well, my downfall is I talk too much, and if I was sheriff, they would envy the fact that we have this timekeeper here keeping me quiet. And I'm sorry, the one before that was.
What is one characteristic that sets you apart from your opponents?
I'll try and answer that for my 1 minute.
All right, now the first question, what do you feel the biggest challenge facing the sheriff's department is at this time?
Well, to say the heroin problem or epidemic, because I agree with that, is the underlying one issue. We have several issues. The heroin problem is one. I talked about it earlier. Substance abuse. Alcoholism is we see that every day. The heroin problem, you can see every day, but the heroin or the alcoholism is something that we see every day, every shift, and we respond to that. And there's tragic things that fall from that. So you have a substance abuse problem, but with that, I just touched on it, domestic violence. Anything in this world today, if you read the paper, turn the radio on, ESPN, I can't believe you can watch sports now, and now they're talking about substance or domestic abuse policies now they have to put in place. It is a prevalent problem in this community, nationwide as well. So we have multiple things that are going on, and we need to address all of them. We need to be diligent. We need to be accountable. We need to go to work and start working on these problems.
How do you define public safety? What practices will you implement to help ensure it?
Well, defining public safety is to be accountable, approachable, accessible to the public. After all, you guys pay our wage. We are here to serve you and to provide a safe community to live in and prosper.
Final question, what is the one characteristic that sets you apart from your opponents? What would be one of your possible downfalls as sheriff, and how do you plan to compensate for it?
Well, the idea of approachability, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but the idea of approachability, that's what sets me apart from both candidates. I can talk to anybody. Like I said, I'm a proud blue-collar citizen of this county, and I've got a passion for people. I got a passion for my job, I got a passion for people, and it's probably because I'm raising 2 girls. So I've always said it's the best thing that's happened to me. And the idea of wanting to help people is really what drives me each day. So, but to do that, I have to be approachable. So I feel like I am. And I hear it each day when I actually go to work. I hear it each day as I'm campaigning throughout this past year, more than a year now. And I pride myself on it. As far as a weakness, it's probably impatience. When I get an idea that I want to do something, I want it done. And I realize now with government, it's not always going to work like that. So that'll be tough for me. But the idea of being diligent to get the job done is what you can rest assured that come January 1, when I'm your sheriff, that we're going to do that. Thank you.
John, Steve, you have your last minute.
Yes, I do, thank you. I could sustain any three of us, any of the three here being sheriff. I can sustain that. I have faith in these two guys, I have faith in myself. What you're going to get with me is a civil libertarian as sheriff. You're going to get a good administrator who's had a lot of experience, which is what the job mostly calls for, who has some law enforcement background as well, and I'm a fairly good researcher. I've done a lot of research. I wish I had more time for it, but I'm in an intensive business, and so I don't get as much time for that as I'd like. But you're going to get a civil libertarian that would be your chief law enforcement officer in the county. So that's what sets us apart, but I don't think that there's going to be a mistake in any direction that we finally decide to go.
Al, would you like another minute? Final question. This is for Steve. The federal government offers the police departments money in different forms, grants, equipment, all presented as a no strings attached transaction. We all know there is no such thing as no strings attached transaction. Participation in a federal program to receive the money is a slippery slope and can have unintended consequences. Arizona Sheriff Arpaio, who has been investigating the president's documents, has recently found his DOJ military equipment being recalled. Are you willing to blindly accept federal funds?
No, I've been awake to this as well for many years. We need to use the resources that we can, and it's going to be tough to say no to certain things, but I'll be able to do that. Now, I'm not too sure about what the ramifications are going to be, so you're going to have to decide that if your sheriff does that and says no, and the federal government decides, well, we're going to do this or we're going to do that, you're going to have to sustain the fact that the sheriff did that for you, because we're just not going to let them impose. So ultimately the decision is yours, but again, like I said a little while ago, your chance of control is every 4 years, and then you lose it until the next 4 years. And so, yes, I can say no. I can't necessarily protect us from the ramifications of that. We will do the best we can, but yes, I am not going to accept blindly federal funds. Yes, there's a lot there that can be used for assistance, like I mentioned a minute ago, the JAG funds. We need better treatment options. We don't need to be throwing these kids into jail. We need to get them straightened out and give them some treatments, and those are the kinds of solutions that we need to go forward with, not some of these other things that have failed in the past.
Al, the question is, are you willing to blindly accept federal funds? I'm not going to read the whole question again.
To answer that question, blindly accept the funds? Absolutely not. We need to educate ourselves on the type of money that we're going to get, whether a grant or any type of federal funding of that nature. So if we're going to accept that, we would have to educate ourselves and see what's going to entail for us. Having a little exposure with grants and a little bit that I do know about grant writing, there are stipulations to that. They give you money, but then there's requirements that they have for their monies, which makes sense. But again, to blindly accept the money, I would not be in favor of that.
John, are you willing to blindly accept federal funds?
No, and let me tell you my experience. I've got 15 years, 18 years of grant writing experience, and most of the grants that I've written have come through the federal government. There's not a grant out there that doesn't have some form of stipulation. It's written right into it. You have performance evaluators. You have to answer at least on a quarterly basis as to how you're spending the money. And you know from the get-go, as someone that was researched a number of federal grants, exactly what the stipulations are. There have been a number of grants that I've opted not to write because the stipulations were too stringent. They wanted us to do things that weren't acceptable. I didn't think that it was agreeable to what we do here in LaPorte County, so we bypassed it and went on. But with that being said, I think federal grants can be extremely valuable. What a great way to recapture your tax dollars and bring it back here to LaPorte County. Why should our federal tax dollars go out to Los Angeles, California, or Houston, Texas, and battle their issues, or Washington, D.C., where they can flush it down the toilet? why not bring it back here to LaPorte County? And I think grants can be of extremely valuable resource, and it can supplant our budget, because we have an $8.4 million budget, but when you consider what we do with our budget, it's not a whole lot. 73% of our budget is tied up in salary. That leaves the remaining percentage to do what we do on a daily basis, whether it be put gasoline in our police cars, or buy a new copier, or buy paper goods that go in our copier, or buy a new computer system, or feed our canine dogs. So we've got to capture as much money, your tax dollars, and bring it back here to LaPorte County as we can. So to blindly accept federal government aid or state aid, absolutely not, because I know they come with parameters, and we know what the parameters are well before we accept that money.
Sometimes the strings that are attached aren't stringent enough. In this report, I noted that the ACLU found that the only requirements for police departments getting a lot of this equipment, which again can be useful to protect the police officers in situations where they're properly used, but the only requirement that's been there has been for proper inventory and proper accounting of where the equipment goes. You can even ship it to another police department so long as it's accounted for and that's approved by your state coordinator. But there's been a lot of misuse of this equipment where people have died. There's no strings for that. They don't have any requirements for that. So yes, we need to look at everything very carefully so that we're not doing things blindly. But you should know that there are some times that there aren't stringent enough strings on things and things are being abused.
Al, just say, John? All right, we have reached the end of our questions, so we're going to, are we going to allow them to make a couple of brief statements, or are we going to close out here?
Yeah, a couple of brief.
Okay, we'll start, whoops, careful. Why don't we start with Al and brief statements closing out.
One of my opponents here has more experience or more One of my opponents has more administrative experience than I do. His own statements, and I agree. But that experience has given him the opportunity to put some things into place that haven't happened. So during my 20 years at the sheriff's office, I've worked, again, I've talked about this, I've worked from the bottom up. I've worked with the men and women each day, and currently still do, working the midnight shift. So I know what's needs to happen. I know what works. I know what's not working. I know where we can make some improvements, and I know how to address public concerns. At the end of the day, the bottom line is, none of us, including myself, has any experience being your sheriff. An incumbent only would be able to do that. I think a sheriff needs to be accountable and accessible and approachable to the public. That's the service that we should provide. And I think the idea of approachability is what sets me apart from these other candidates. I hear it each day when I'm out working, walking the streets, talking to people each day while I'm out campaigning. That's what they want. They want people, a sheriff, that's going to answer their concerns and their questions. We haven't touched on all this stuff, but I have plans to put town hall meetings into place, and such as this. I don't know how well attended they will be, but we're going to do them. They'll be advertised. We're going to hear the concerns of the people and the public, so we can bring that service back to them, to you. At the end of the day, this campaign is not about me. It's about us. It's about us working together as a community with your sheriff's office. You need a sheriff that can connect with people to bridge the growing gap with law enforcement in our community. We've talked about several things this evening. Some of the candidates, I'm not sure who brought it up. Turn on your TV. There's a whole unfortunate incident happened in Ferguson. You know, I hope that it doesn't happen here. But you never know. There's no guarantees in life. And I would much rather have the community on my side when an unfortunate incident or something like that should happen. Because I think a lot of the things that are happening after the fact maybe not been so aggressive or negative. So At the end of the day, I'm asking you for your vote. We need a sheriff that can connect with the public in order to help solve LaPorte County's problems. So I'm asking you, I'm Al Ott. I'm your Democratic candidate for the sheriff's race here in this fall election. November 4th, it's right around the corner. So I respectfully ask for your vote. And I do also want to push the whole idea of early voting. It is happening now. It's open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. We have 2 courthouses, which is a very rare thing nationwide. We have 2 courthouses in this county. Take advantage of them. They're there. They're open. And also, the next 3 Saturdays from 8 to 3, early voting is occurring. So go out, educate yourself as you're doing now, and you can early vote. Take advantage of it, and thank you for your time tonight. Again, thank you to the LaPorte Patriots, excuse me. Again, it's a good event. Thank you.
John, you next. Make some closing remarks.
There are a lot of issues that we have here in LaPorte County. Again, we can talk about it all we want. Let's start doing something about it. It's going to take strong leadership to deliver us from this. And I agree with Al. He's absolutely right. Your sheriff does need to be approachable. I'm proud of the fact that I'm approachable. I'm approachable. I did the DARE program. It's at the time, President Clinton, when I was doing the DARE program, said that it was the #1 community policing program in the nation at the time. He touted it. He funded it because it was such a great way for law enforcement to connect with society and the small communities. LaPorte County is very, very unique. We're so diverse, demographically, geographically. The concerns that people have in La Crosse are so much different than the concerns that the people in Michigan City have. Likewise, the concerns of the people in Hudson Lake are much different than the concerns they have in Hannah. The sheriff needs to be acutely aware of the differences and be in tune with what's going on in these communities, and that's something that I'm proud that I've been in tune with throughout my career. I'm a public information officer at the sheriff's office. Not a week goes by where I'm not meeting with a community organization. Maybe it's the Wills Township Historical Society. There's a group of 12 older ladies that get together when I go in when they're having a coffee, and I talk to them about the sheriff's department. Or today I was with the Rotary Club here in LaPorte, telling them about one of the programs that LaPorte County Sheriff's Office does. So I'm in touch with our community. I believe in our community. I'm a member of our community, and I raised my family in our community. The tough issues that we have here in LaPorte County, the heroin issue, substance abuse, keeping our kids safe in schools, our lack of communication with the public, and our lack of accountability, we need to restore that. We need to have plans in place. We need to involve the community. We need to have the community rally around and support their sheriff's office. This is a very pivotal time. It's not about who's a Republican, who's a Libertarian, who's a Democrat. It's not about your party. It's not about who has the most signs. It's about who has a plan, who's got a proven record, who's already started to work towards bettering their community, and who has the experience to deliver us out of these issues that we're having here in LaPorte County. I ask for your support in the upcoming November 4th election because I've got the experience, I've got the integrity, I've got the background, I've got the desire and the passion to do the job. You're going to have more than a full-time sheriff if you elect me as your sheriff. I thank you for coming out tonight and taking an active interest in what's going on in LaPorte County, and in particular with your sheriff's office. I thank the LaPorte Patriots. Thank you for organizing this event, Lou. You've done a nice job. It's been an honor to be here with you tonight. Thank you for your attentiveness, and thank you for entertaining the three of us. We're very fortunate, and I'm very honored to be running with these gentlemen. Al and I have been friends for a long time. I'm honored to be going through this process with him. I think the world of his family. Al, you took a chance on me back in 1988. You hired me at the LaPorte Police Department, and I'm forever indebted to you for that. Thank you for taking a chance. But Ken Layton, you took a chance on me as well. And if it weren't for you, Larry Trueblood, I wouldn't be here today. So thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to disagree with John just a little bit here on the politics of it all, because when it comes down to it, the two major parties, they're going to feel the pressure of being one of the most powerful positions in the county, and you can't ignore that. So I'm going to do something just a little bit different here. I like a well-written screenplay, a well-written movie script, and I'm going to quote from a couple here. So one of them is It's a Wonderful Life. And this is the scene where George Bailey is trying to convince the board of the Bailey Building and Loan to let the organization stay. And he's giving his speech, and Potter, who's sitting back, he's the richest man in town, and oh, he's yawning. Nothing George says makes any difference at all. It's kind of like what we get from the Republicans and the Democrats in this country. And that's because they're in power. So, no, okay, yeah, I hear your complaint. But George then says something that really gets to Potter. You can see it in his face. It's very good acting. He says, we need this measly little one-horse building and loan, if only to have some place to go where people don't have to crawl to Potter. Now he's scared because his facade has just been exposed. So I want to give you an idea here that I know a lot of you are diehard Republicans, diehard Democrats, and there's nothing wrong with that. Been there, done that, and I respect you for it. And I know that you're going to vote that way. But if you're unhappy with the way that your party has responded to you, you may have withheld money from them, but they're going to get the money, wherever. So that's not a good way to protest if you don't like what they're doing. The only thing that they can't legally get back is if you vote for a third party. Then they start to stand up and take notice. The Libertarians are starting to get up there, and that's a good way to protest. Now, I realize that in this race you may have one of three favorites here, but consider the fact that they're yawning at you. The parties in control are yawning at your complaints. It is politics, and it's time to show them something a little different. So if I can, let me quote a couple of other things real quick. In The Natural, when Roy Hobbs is having dinner with the coach on his first day there, the coach is trying to get him to open up because nobody knows nothing about him. Sound familiar? They want to know, he wants to know what he's like, and he says, he's avoiding his questions. And he says, look, you play me, you'll get the best I got. So I just wanted to quote that one as well. I also appreciate you coming out here tonight. I thank the LaPorte County Patriots for sponsoring this. It's well attended. I'm thankful for your live hearts that you care enough. I know that some of you have a favorite candidate. But let me close with a quote from Anne Shirley. Megan Follows playing Anne Shirley. If you knew how much I really wanted to say and didn't, you'd give me some credit. Thank you very much for coming.
All right. Information for the candidates are all on the table over here. On behalf of the LaPorte County Patriots, I'd like to thank you for participating in the 2014 Sheriff's Candidates Debate. I hope this event was informative and shed some light on who the candidates are, what they stand for. I would like to thank the candidates, John Boyd, Al Ott, and Steve Osborne. A special thanks to Elizabeth Ward for all her help in making this event possible. Thanks to the Civic Auditorium for the venue. I thank you again for coming. Good night and drive safe.